Hi there, welcome to our program Auteur Talk. This is the second interview we're doing. I am your host Emir Aktel, director of the Independent Cinephiles Short Film Festival and Madonna Club. Tyler P. Henry is one of our first members at this festival. He has been selected with so many movies. He's an awesome filmmaker. His writing techniques are really cool. He can create something really absurd and real at the same time. So most of his movies are really dark humorish for me, and I love them. So we're going to make an interview with him.
Hello, my name is Tyler P. Henry. I am the director of such films as Two Ghosts and a Gent, Three Bad Men, True Story of an Alcoholic, and The Last Detail. I would like to thank the Independent Cinephiles Short Film Festival for being one of the most communal and welcoming spots for filmmakers to have their work shown, and the exposure and the opportunities they've given me. I'm eternally grateful. So thank you once again.
So let's start with your first Independent Cinephiles Short Film Festival award winner project, Three Bad Men. I personally like this because of its sarcastic kind of storytelling, and it didn't have a straightforward narrative. It was much more spiritual. How did you come up with this idea?
So Three Bad Men, the title is based off of a John Ford film. It's a film I love dearly. It's a silent film. I was writing a script called The Ramblers that I wasn't really happy with. It was more of me and the script than the actors when we started shooting it. And so what had happened is the intro was great, and several of the actors give great performances, but it's me who's the downfall of the film. So with the film, I took the beginning, the intro, which is Jedediah, Jonah, and Phallus playing poker. And I remember thinking, like, with or without context to what this character is doing, it works. It's ambiguous enough where people might think about it. It just worked on its own better than the whole movie did. So I just cut it, put credits on the end of it, and then I can't remember who it was. I think it was my colleague Jalen, best friend Jalen and business partner. He had said, it'd be really interesting if it switched to black and white, because one of the actors came up with the idea for turning the lights out in the back. And so when he turned it to black and white, when he does the cut, he pulls the knife out, cuts the black and white. It gave it this like almost orthochromatic 1918 look that we really all loved, but mostly the idea came from watching far too many Coen Brothers films. And if you see the movie, it really does try to resemble Roger Deakins movie or Coen Brothers film in particular. It doesn't quite always work in it, but I definitely think I had a good time shooting that movie and a good time editing that movie.
Every filmmaker has an idol or an inspiration. What made you go forward at filmmaking? You know, is it a movie, a filmmaker, or being able to tell stories itself?
So I could spend all day giving you tons of filmmakers who inspired me. John Ford, Carl Theodore Dreyer, John Carpenter, Elaine May, Sam Peckinpah, Wes Craven. We could G.W. Pabst. Just there's tons. I love Lois Weber, Shoes, Suspense. Right now, Charles Chaplin has been a massive inspiration to me. I've been watching his films. They're getting more into them, further back into his 1915 work, which at that time I believe he was at 12 features, which is incredible. 12 films, I believe they're features. He's had a massive influence currently on my editing. I love Martin Scorsese. He's on my shirt. I think most people love Martin Scorsese. However, of course, I'm a massive fan of people like the Coen Brothers, Steven Soderbergh. They've all had huge influences. There's a lot of directors I could just sit here and tell you about, but a lot of the question was, what moves me to be a filmmaker? And that's an extremely difficult question. I don't think any filmmaker fully knows what moves them. I'm not trying to be pretentious. I just feel as if though you're drawn to a specific art medium because the way it moves you. Some people are moved more by music. Some people, my father, these are his guitars, and his father, my grandfather, were both musicians, and his uncles were. And music moved them, where when I tried all these instruments, music never moved me in the same way. I didn't feel expression. And I like movement, though, so that's why I couldn't be a photographer or a painter. Stills photographer or a painter. So cinema to me is bodies and spaces. It's the wind in the trees. It's the way the blades of grass hit. It's the way the sun moves over an actor's face and combines with the lighting, and the magic behind it doesn't feel like magic. It just feels like hard work to create magic. And so that, I think, is what drives me. The unknown of it. It is the way I express myself, even if I'm trying to, even if I'm not trying to. It is my deepest thoughts, fears, desires, subconsciously being put out in 24 frames per second, or 23.98. That's what I use. So that's my answer for that.
The second project that selected through our festival was a true story of Alcoholic, your another movie. I remember it had a twisted dark comedy that you have tastefully at each one of your pictures. And what was the idea behind this story?
Okay, first of all, True Story of an Alcoholic. The title is a lie. Massive fan of Fargo. And it's not a complete lie, okay? Fargo, they had read a article about a man kidnapping somebody and then sticking his partner in the wood chipper. And I was thinking, well, I heard recently a story about two dudes having an altercation where they were just screaming cuss words at her. They weren't really fighting each other. They were just screaming cuss words. And so my idea here was I was writing a script called Faces. And I was watching the movie Faces quite a bit. That's why it's named Faces. I love John Cassavetes. And I wrote this script, we'd filmed the whole thing, and it was another situation with the Ramblers where it was like I was trying to make features, but I wasn't ready, and I'm barely feeling like I'm ready now. So the movie wasn't very good, and it's on my behalf that it wasn't very, very, very good. No one else's. But the beginning was great. The beginning was excellent. And when I had wrote Faces and I named it Faces, I was thinking it would be better if it was called True Story of an Alcoholic. So I took that title and put it over there. And I did try to influx the immaturity of it because the character, in context of the whole script, is very emotionally immature. But that's basically it. It's the beginning of a film that we cut off. And I remember reading about a traffic incident where two men were throwing expletives at each other.
Every filmmaker has a powerful side. Sometimes it's writing, sometimes it's editing, sometimes it's your relationship with actors. You can, take really good performances out of them. What do you think is your powerful side?
I'm just now kind of learning how to talk with actors. So we'll go ahead and rule out actors. Just learn how to talk to them. I consider myself an okay blueprint writer, but a better director. Editing is pretty much, I'm shooting to edit for the most part, which angers some people on sets. And then I am almost certain that my strongest qualities are direction and blocking. So direction with blocking, and camera placement and cinematography. My lighting's decent, but I would definitely say it is blocking where to put the camera, where to put the actors, what focal lengths we're using. Usually the 18 through 40 millimeter range.
Two Ghosts and a Gent was another one of your movies that had, that you created a crime story with really interesting characters and backstories. The story starts non-linear and we figure the whole picture out through the end. This creates a mysterious effect and it works just fine. How this process works? Do you create this while writing or while editing it?
So Two Ghosts and a Gent was written exactly how it plays out in the movie. The Limey is one of my favorite films. I use it all the time. That was one of those examples where I did that. But yeah, I have plenty of times taken a movie, decided that it didn't work in a linear function, and I've recut it, removed it, done whatever you wanted to say I could do to it. But in this case, the narrative does come straight from the script, and it is, in my opinion, one of my better written scripts. And it is exactly how it plays out. I mean, the actors who did a phenomenal job in that film, they pretty much verbatim read the lines as well. So basically that movie is one of those where it's not a blueprint. It's almost identical to the actual script.
We have noticed that you have created a really special relationship with Jalen Wilson Nellum, and you guys are like Robert De Niro and Martin Scorsese. How did you two met, and how did you, started this partnership?
That's so nice. So, pause. Let the editor cut here. Jalen Wilson Nellum. Jalen Wilson Nellum is my brother. I don't view him like a brother. He is my brother. Brother from another mother. I hold him very near and dear. He is my closest friend, far and away. He is my brother. We own a production company together. We hang out every weekend. We work on projects together. I always have him. He always has me. That's how it works. How we met was through a mutual who we're both close friends with, Tristan. He introduced us and wanted to show him American Psycho. And we also had watched a bunch of the same YouTube channels. So we hit it off really well, and I'd wanted him to show him some other films, but I ended up having to leave. But American Psycho was the movie that I showed him that he really enjoyed. That kind of kicked off the whole friendship. Our buddy Tristan introduced us.
Your movie, The Last Detail, has its own style and understanding. And how did you come up with it? Did you choose... My dog. Yeah. I think we're just going to wait for him to stop barking. That happens a lot. Sorry about that. So again, with The Last Detail, did you choose the genre first and build a story around it? Or you had an interesting story, then you created a new mood around it. How did it go?
I had an interesting story, and Last Detail is a very loose remake of a great film by Hal Ashby, 1973, called The Last Detail, starring Jack Nicholson. Wonderful film. I highly recommend you go watch it. So I wanted to create a new mood around it, and it was more of an inspired by than necessarily a loose remake. The concept's the same. But in Last Detail 73, it's two officers taking in I think it's Dennis Quaid's brother, taking in Dennis Quaid's brother. Yeah, Jack Quaid? I think it's a Quaid. Taking him in because he committed a theft on base. And it's like, that's a really good idea, but what if we made it where one of the characters is a former bullied, violent individual who's kind of like a ticking time bomb, and I wanted my own aesthetic that was similar to the 70s aesthetic of Hal Ashby, but not quite as much. So I wanted the film to feel more voyeuristic, and there's a shot where I'm laying on the ground, and I'm hiding, and I'm peeking the camera on a 25mm lens, and I wanted more of an aesthetic like that, and I wanted it to feel like you were creeping on them, and it was an extremely uncomfortable scenario. So that meant putting the camera like a 25mm lens and right in our actor Austin McCoy's face, right in the back seat, so there's no way he can escape. It's just all him.
So we have seen a lot of movies of yours, and we have our own favorites, but I'm curious that what is your own favorite movie that you directed?
Favorite film of mine that I've directed? Well, that's impossible to answer. No, it's not. That's hard, though. So, if I were to say the favorite film I've directed, the one that I just have recently, in the freshest of memories, that I enjoyed the most, out of like from Three Bad Men all the way to now, would probably be an unreleased project that is in the scoring phase right now called In the Trees that you guys will be getting. I got to stick, mostly on the 25, the 28, and the 35 millimeter lens, which are my favorite focal lengths, and throw the 18 in there too. I love shooting on those lenses. I loved blocking with the actors. We had two. It was Jalen and an actor named Ever Liddell, and it was just this extremely calm, chilled atmosphere where we all were openly collaborating and we all had a great time. By the way, I'd like to say too, I've had some of my most fun on sets in the last few years. Last year, I would say, for sure. I've gotten to collaborate with some really wonderful actors who have been extremely giving and have upped the film. And I'm extremely grateful for that. It's been extremely rewarding and an honor to watch people like Jalen Wilson Nellum grow as well as they have. And working as well, and as their instincts being tuned, and it's just been a very rewarding journey that I'm very grateful for.
Which movie of yours was the hardest one to make, and why?
Great question. So a lot of those features I was talking about that didn't end up getting made were extremely hard to make. So I don't want to talk about them though because they didn't get released. The film that was one of the hardest ones to make for me was The Last Detail. I was so afraid of stealing too much from Hal Ashby. I had really good actors supporting cast who were kind of dealing with someone who was really afraid to interact, and it was at a crux where I had to decide, are you the director who doesn't ever speak to his actors and is more of a cinematographer who's telling them where to stand? Or are you a director? And it was a lot of days of me trying out how to speak to actors, new directions, and not having the confidence to do so. That did make that film difficult. There was also just plenty of schedule issues that kept happening throughout The Last Detail. And that's partially why The Last Detail is edited the way it is, particularly the intercutting on the scenes, is we could never get, just because of what was going on in everybody's lives at that moment, we couldn't get them all in one room, or in this case a parking lot, at the same time, and it just wasn't quite working out. But I think that's one of those things where it gives you a gift there, because I really like the intro of that movie, and I really like that movie, but that's the one I'd go to, is The Last Detail. If I were to say a close number 2 would be Intolerable Visions, which I need to submit to you guys. That movie was extremely challenging. We were in a lawyer's office for about 4 or 5 hours. I don't do a ton of takes, so it doesn't take a ton of time. And it was just hot. It was just so hot the whole time. And I remember it was like you're dripping in sweat. The actors are in long sleeve shirts. I was in a tank top every single day, but the actors were in long sleeve shirts, and they were on fire. So just for the atmosphere and the climate, I would have to go for number 2, Intolerable Visions.
Let's continue with our 10th question. What's the biggest challenge about filmmaking for you?
Biggest challenge filmmaking to me is, without a doubt, speaking to actors. It's funny, when I say cut, I can talk to them just fine, have no problems. But when we're in a scene and I have to give a direction, it's somehow my greatest gift to not use the right words in any way, shape, or form. And I've gotten way better at it, way better. And I think the biggest issue is a lot of colleges and a lot of media outlets try to change what directing is to benefit a more business allocation than necessarily the application to directing human beings in a space. And so that's what I would say is the biggest challenge in my filmmaking.
What do you think about current situation of short film filmmakers? Lots of people are trying to make short films to them for making future films. I always believe that, if you're a cinema artist, you have to have your own language and narrative. Making a straight feature film would no impact of anything. We hope to give attention to auteur short films in, global cinema community. And what's your take about this situation? I don't think that you're trying to, make a award winner short film to go and make a feature film, because I think you give importance to your narrative and your ideas.
I completely agree. That is an incredible response, incredible quote for that. I think that's a brilliant way of putting it. I tried that. I made some shorts. They were small. You make them in a weekend, maybe 2 weekends. Entirely different crew of actors that I used back then that I use now. They weren't actors. They were just friends who I got to talk into being actors, except Jalen Wilson-Ellum. And then we made a feature, and we were not ready, and it was terrible, and it had no impact, and we'd gotten into no festivals with the short films because they weren't great, and I was way too cocky. And my take on it, too, is short films have to be taken seriously as an art. They have to be. You can't keep using the logic of, I'm trying to build myself up to a feature, getting noticed. Sure, you can want that to happen. I think that's completely fair. But you have to treat it as its own narrative language, its own structure, its own thing. It can't just be treated as a stepping stool, or you're not telling a story. You're trying to create yourself as a storyteller. It takes years to do this, and I think people try to rush it, and what we get is really immature filmmakers. I can think of quite a few right now who, if they would have just spent more time making short films, and they now work in Hollywood, they're making terrible films, they make some money, and they're extremely unfulfilled because they're not expressing themselves. They don't feel like they're expressing themselves. They feel like they're just doing a job every day, which is nothing wrong with if you want to do that as a job every day. I know I do. But I think the film festival, the Independent Cinephile Film Festival, I've watched like every short film that I've been able to watch that have been presented in the nominations. It's a great festival. I've talked to people on there. They're absolutely wonderful. I consider them friends. They're some of the nicest people you'll meet. It's just a beautiful thing. It's your guys' ability to reach out to the artist creates its own narrative from across the globe. I live in the United States, and I believe the festival takes place in Turkey, if I'm correct. It's a far away place, but I feel like I am friends with all of you. So, you guys are doing a beautiful thing.
We know your style and your own methods, but you must have another taste beyond the movies that you made. And for example, what do you think about our film, The Exhibition? It's a different kind of a film than yours, but what was your first impressions while you watched the film?
The Exhibition! Yes! I enjoyed that quite a bit. So my opinions about cinema yourself, I'm going to just deduce here that you're talking about like my criticisms on films, things like that, the type of movies I prefer to watch. So pause and then I'll answer the question. So the tastes that define my cinema is, like I said, John Ford. I love, 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 love silent cinema. I love old cinema. I love foreign cinema. And I love like the Hollywood 1950s cinema that can be extremely expressive towards political movements in ways that they couldn't outright speak and say so, or they'd be in trouble. Speaking about your film Exhibition, I quite enjoy that. It reminds me of an Ocean's 11 film that has a bit of a dark little twist at the end. Ocean's 11? Yeah, Yeah, it's Ocean's 11, 12, 13. Yes, Ocean's 11. My apologies. I really enjoyed that film. It is an extremely different kind of film than mine. Your ability to do the comedy in a context to like a Guy Ritchie or even a Quentin Tarantino is really remarkable and a skill that I wish I had. The movie was funny, it moved extremely quick, and it was cool. And I mean that cool is in like a Dennis Lehane book. It's cool. Leonard Elmore. God, not Dennis Lehane. Who is Dennis Lehane? Especially with modern cinema, I tend to find myself not going to the movies as much as I did when I was, say, 16, which was like every single weekend. I do find myself going more to repertory theaters because of that, with Jalen Wilson-Nullum, of all people. And it's mostly because I dislike a lot of movies coming out, but it's not always the case. I recently really enjoyed Infinity Pool, which was like came out last week. Brendan Cronenberg, David Cronenberg's son. Jalen enjoyed that as well. People I was with enjoyed that. Jordan Peele's Nope is another good one. But like for an example, Tar was a great movie. Benediction was the best film I saw last year, and it didn't get a theatrical release in the United States at all. And it's an incredible film. If Jack Lowden had been nominated for Best Actor, he could have most likely won. It's an incredible performance, incredible movie. And so I don't really enjoy like Marvel movies or comic book movies, stuff like that at all. I do find myself more interested in what people are making, like independent filmmakers with exhibition and stuff like that, in movies like Tar and Benediction, than I am going to go see the newest Ant-Man film. I would like to thank you guys again for the wonderful opportunity. I have to give out, a special thanks to my mom and dad, Angela and Paul Henry, my sister Brittany Henry, Stephanie Wilson, John Nellum, Jacoby, the Alana, Anja, of course, Jalen Wilson-Nullum himself.
So we're wrapping up. This was our second interview with Tyler P. Henry, awesome guy, and we hope to see more awesome movies from him in the distant future. So, bye guys.